AVC, how's it going? Right, okay, very quick video. This is what I'm to listen to in the background. This is Ennio Morricone, one of his albums from the early 60s, original Italian pressing. Not a recent pickup, but I've been listening to quite a bit recently, so very nice. Right, okay, cool. Right, so I normally show a lot of soul, funk and reggae. Today I'm going to show anything but that, so it's just odds and sods that I picked up over the summer, so hopefully it'll be quite interesting. So, right, first up, this is the Pentangle Sweet Child. Now, this album came out in 1968. It's on the Transatlantic label. This is an original pressing, not nice gatefold sleeve, you see that. This is, I think, a 1970s pressing, but it's in absolutely lovely condition. Double album, one's a live record, the other is a studio album. Right, so the reason why I picked this up, this has been on the wall of my local record shop for the past 7 or 8 months. And I kept looking at it, thinking that's an album that I'd like to hear, but I didn't want to pay the price. So, and then I saw Psych in the Valley, Steve. He made a recent video where he showed this, probably about a month, 6 weeks ago. Spoke very highly of it, so I went back to the shop. The record was still there, so I made a cheeky offer of a tenner for it, which the owner very kindly accepted. So, yeah, absolutely chuffed to pick it up. Now, if I'm totally honest, I'm not a massive fan of English folk music, or Irish folk music for that matter. I love the musicianship, I love the playing, but that vocal style often just leaves me cold. I mean, I own a number of folk albums, so stuff like Nick Drake, John Martin, Richard Thompson, but even Richard Thompson, you know, I love some of his music, but some of his records just don't do anything for me, which I appreciate is blasphemy for a lot of people in the VC, but, you know, just being honest. So, but this is a gorgeous record. As I say, the playing is absolutely exquisite. Yeah, glad I picked it up, and perhaps has got me a little bit more interested in the genre again. So yeah, very cool. Right, okay. This was a pound that I picked up from a car boot sale in the summer. This is Love for Sale. This is their 4th record. Now, prior to picking this up, the only Love album that I had was Forever Changes, which is an absolute classic. This is very different. This is more of a straight ahead rock record. I think actually by the time this came out, most of the personnel had changed, so it's obviously got a very different feel to it. Yeah, I think actually it's probably only Arthur Lee that has remained in at this point. Yeah, the final track on the album I already knew, Always See Your Face. It's used in the High Fidelity film, but everything else was new to me. When I bought it, I thought this is something I was probably going to flip and look to make a few quid on straight away, but I think it's something I'll keep. It's a record that I've played quite a bit over the last few weeks, so very cool. Right, okay. And that's on the Gold Electra label. There you go. Right, okay, and a new album from this year, Paul Weller, True Meanings. Now, I always show Weller's albums when they come out. I always pick up his stuff. By far one of my favourite artists, and I genuinely think that this run of album that he's been on since 22 Dreams, which is about 10 years ago, I think it's the most consistent run of records of his career. You know, when you're talking about the Jam, the Star Council or solo, you know, he just really is at the top of his game, and this is no exception. Now, this has got a lot of attention in the music press because it's a slightly different album. It's very laid back. It's predominantly acoustic with the addition of strings. Yeah, so and this vinyl copy is certainly the best sounding record that I've heard all year. As I say, the production, the record sounds great, the pressing is gorgeous, and so much care's gone into the sleeve. Now, first of all, I love that image. I love the fact that he's smoking on the sleeve, you know. So I've never smoked, I don't condone smoking, but I've got to say it looks cool. So it certainly looks a lot cooler than vaping, which don't get me started on, but there you go. So yeah, that's a great sounding album. Would definitely recommend that. Even down to the detail of the recording labels, a real nod to the Beatles' early records. So very cool. Right, okay. Now, when we went on the VC meetup up in Leeds, I met up with Martin Parrott, and Martin had this record in his bag, and basically asked around if anybody wanted it. And I put my hand up and bagged it because you may notice there from the picture, I don't know, but it's basically a duo of Beth Orton and William Orbit. Now, Beth Orton made a couple of absolutely wonderful solo albums in the 90s, Central Reservation and Trailer Park are two of my favourite albums of that decade. Great stuff, great singer-songwriter music. William Orbit obviously made solo records, but also as a producer he produced Madonna's best record, which is Ray of Light, which came out in the late 90s. This is them together in the very early 90s. I think it's about 91, sorry, 92. It's on Virgin Records. The band that they put together was called Spill, and this is a track called Don't Want to Know About Evil, which is a cover of the John Martin song. Now, it's basically sort of an early 90s dance version, which will sound awful to some people, but I love it. I was so impressed by this. I thought this is something I was going to play once, not play again, but yeah, definitely worth checking out if you don't know it, so very cool. Right, okay. Now, a couple of other records I picked up from my local record store are Tim Buckley albums. Now, I always pick up Tim Buckley's records whenever I see them. I just don't see them very often. You know, so I think he had an absolutely fascinating career. Now, every album feels like it's a reaction to the one that came before it. So he made straight singer-songwriter records, he made jazz records, funk records, avant-garde records. Yeah, you know, an absolutely fascinating artist. And he had an incredibly distinctive voice as well. So this album's from the mid-70s. You look on Wikipedia, this is described as his sex funk period, which I'm not so sure about that title, but yeah, it's definitely funky. It's a mixture of straight singer-songwriter stuff and funk. It contains probably his most famous song, which is his version of Fred Neil's Dolphins, which, you know, is one of the great cover versions as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, and this is a nice album. This is on the Discreet label. Yeah, so pleased to pick that up, and I'll do a needle drop on some of that as well. But perhaps a little bit more interestingly is this. I picked this up at the same time. This is his Lorca album. This came out in 1970. This is a later press from the early 80s. I think it's 1980 on Elektra. Now this is clearly heavily improvised. It's basically an avant-garde album. The way he uses his voice is, you know, is extraordinary. It's, yeah, definitely worth checking out. I appreciate it's quite a divisive record, not to everybody's taste. But yeah, I played this one a lot. Yeah, I really enjoyed that, so I definitely suggest seeking that one out if that's your sort of thing. Right, okay. Now this is something I picked up from my local Oxfam shop. This is Jali Musa Jawara. Now you can see on the cover there, he's playing an African instrument called a kora, which I assume is like a harp. Reading about it, it's got 32 strings, and I think it's basically plucked and played like a harp. That's my sort of layman description of it. But yeah, this came out in the mid 80s. It's very much traditional African music. I'll do a needle drop on this as well. It's absolutely beautiful. I played this a lot over the last few weeks. Just gorgeous stuff. So I definitely recommend checking out some more of that. The reason why I picked it up, obviously because of the sleeve, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about the artist in advance, but it's on the Opal label, who put out some really nice African records in the 80s. So that's the main reason why I picked it up. But I'll do a needle drop on that. Right, okay, very quickly, a few other records. A friend recently picked up a collection of jazz records, and then amongst them all was this. So excuse me, this is Steve Vai's Flexible. Now this came out I think in 1984. Now if you haven't heard this, forget everything you know about Steve Vai. You know, he's that virtuoso guitar player. He played with likes of Whitesnake, David Lee Roth. He's made a number of solo albums. Passion and Warfare is probably his most famous solo record, but this is his first record, which came out, I say 1984, recorded on an 8-track. And it follows his stint playing with Frank Zappa, and you can tell. Now I first heard this in the early 90s, and I must say I can't have heard it in 25 years. And listening to it, I could remember every note. It's such a distinctive record. Actually, my wife heard me playing this, and she came in and she said, didn't you used to play that when we were kids, you know? So she obviously remembered the track I'm talking about is the opening track, Little Green Men, which I'll do a needle drop of. It reminds me of I Zimbra, which is the opening track on Talking Heads' Fear of Music album. It's got a very similar feel to it, so I say, see what you think. But yeah, I think the American version had a different sleeve actually, but yeah, this is a UK copy in great condition, so I really enjoyed that, so that's cool. Right, okay, very quickly, another new album from this year. This is a band called Our Girl. Now I'm struggling to remember her name, but the lead singer in the band, she's also in another band called The Big Moon, who put out an album last year, which for me was one of the best records of the year. That was had more of a Britpop feel. This has got more of an indie shoegazy feel. So the band's called Our Girl. It's the album's called Stranger Today. yeah, I definitely recommend that, and I'll do a needle drop on this. Really interesting stuff. Yeah, it really got my attention this year, so very cool. Right, okay. And finally, quickly, this is a 70s library album called Cosmos 2043. It's by a musician called, I think his name's pronounced Bernard Fevre. He's a French library musician. A few years ago, 3 of his albums were reissued. I looked them all at the time, all about 20 quid. I picked this up off eBay a week or so ago for a £5. Really pleased with it. It's basically a science fiction themed library record. Yeah, that might appeal to some, it might not to others, but yeah, very cool. Cheers.
We hope that your ship is okay. We hope you're gonna stick around, maybe to save the day. You look so real cute, even though you are green, with those big, large heads, something off of the movie screen.
Just like the sun chased the moon around, just like the fox and chased the rabbit down. Well, I've been wanting you, woman, but it ain't no habit, no. Don't you come too near me, 'cause I'm a loud for the rabbit, 'cause I'm a stone in love. Stone in love. I can almost taste it. Romantic,